My name is Smilin Observer, and I want to talk to you concerning something that I deem to be serious, but nevertheless, adventure seekers out there are going to go and check it out anyway. It's about Ouija boards. In my search to discover more stories to read to you guys, I came across a website, and as I said at the conclusion of my last video, entitled ASMR More Scary Rated Readings Part 1, I've read you many scary Ouija board stories. Now, some people don't get it. Adventure seekers are going to do it. People who are novices or novice, I don't know how you plural novice, but they're going to do it too. They're going to continue to hear the stories about Ouija boards, and they're going to think of it as just a game, and they're going to proceed to play with them. And if they are lucky, nothing will happen. But that hasn't always been the case. So, I'm going to read to you from a website called The Ghost Diaries. 5 freaky Ouija board messages you hope to never see. And this is by a best-selling paranormal author, Gary Allen. And he starts off by saying that the Ouija board has a message for you. Danger seekers can fully expect that the plastic pointer, or planchette as it is called, will navigate the letters and numbers displayed on the slick board and spell out responses to your questions. Unfortunately, some engage the board with a naive curiosity, cavalier sort of attitude of unbelief in the paranormal. But unfortunately, as warranted concern, they have this attitude toward what it's going to say. Now, over the years, people have shared thousands of stories that cite communication with an unseen presence. The tales include countless threatening warnings, haunting predictions, and ultimate knowledge of familiar names and dates. For some very unlucky players of the game, it has even produced a physical manifestation beyond the confines of the board, often terrifying presence. To prove the often terrifying presence of a spirit or a demon. Now, before you play with the board, brace yourself for one or all of these 5 frequent responses. Number 5, a death date. It is very common strategy to ask questions of the board that are only known to you. The queries might include a street address, an age, or a birth date. An accurate response to the latter often fuels an immediate trust and a desire to move past the testing stage and utilize the seemingly impressive board to uncover the unknown. Foolishly, many then ask for their date of death. Human beings, while completely aware and even mostly accepting of our mortality, are by design not privy to individual expiration dates. Imagine the fear of knowing that on a particular day that you would perish. Each moment of that day would be terrifying as you brace yourself for an attack or an event. Even the days leading up to the final 24 hours would be wrought with panic of the impending end. Regrets of things not accomplished and experiences not lived label you a failure and weigh down an already heavy heart. In 1994, Mick Levins received countless accurate predictions from his Ouija board that included his date of marriage, the birth of his daughter, and sadly, the death of his father. Convinced of the board's ability to predict the future, Mick shared his devastating prophecy that his brother, Kevin, would die just 2 years later. At first, Kevin dismissed the forecast as nonsense. Mick then urged his older brother to test the board himself. After an intense session filled with countless questions, Kevin walked away from the board as a believer. Kevin became a recluse and felt he could cheat his prophesied death by withdrawing from the world. He crossed the lines of hermit and hoarder, while his demeanor wafted from panic to paranoia. Finally, 6 months prior to the board's proclaimed date of death, Kevin took his own life. Instead of passing on to a better place with a feeling of pride and a sense of accomplishment, you may live your days in the end consumed with fear. And as in the case of Kevin, end your days. Number 4, a person's full name. Another common query is to ask for someone's full name, which would include their lesser known middle name, and grant the board credibility. While it may sound like an innocuous strategy, psychic medium J. David explains the real evil behind the response. There is one primary thing to consider when the board spells out your full name. First of all, when 2 or more people are working with the Ouija board, a spirit will channel the energy of one of them. This will be the person whose name they spell out across the board, because they now have access to their thoughts. Therefore, they are pulling information contained within the mind of that particular individual. The person or persons act as grounds for interacting energies. It is suspected that some people are more open or susceptible to allowing spirits inside their energy field, which also makes makes them much more vulnerable to suggestion and even possession. And once you allow entry, they are now free to return. Number 3, parlor tricks. Bored with the usual questions of names and dates, Ouija board enthusiasts will sometimes challenge the spirit to prove physically that they truly exist. Requests of making something move or turn out the lights beg the spirits to show themselves to those questioning their abilities. Not the brightest move, Mr. David explains. The spirit will need to utilize every ounce of energy it can avail itself to, and that includes people. The temperature of the room may severely drop, and those that it can drain energy from will feel fatigue and possibly become lightheaded. The spirit will harness every bit of power to move an object or extinguish a candle, or if they have enough strength to even push someone to the ground. The point is that they have, at your request and with your energy, manipulated physical reality from the other side. Access to your sacred home has now been granted to the spirit. How safe do you think you will feel now? Number 2, ZA, ZA, and ZO, ZO. For those who encounter the spirit, or more accurately, demon, that introduces itself as ZA, ZA, note, I am spelling the name. I'm not saying the name. Mr. David has some specific warnings for you. While we don't know for sure who or what ZA is, there are few theories that neither one of them is favorable. Some speculate that it's the spirit of Lola Zaza, the daughter of famed dark practitioner Aleister Crowley, an offspring of the wickedest man in the world, and a Satanist. Others believe it is the Jewish goat demon actually named Azazel, that is connected with the singling out of one peer or child for unfair and negative treatment, hence the term scapegoating. Regardless, ZA spews vile threats between cursing and hateful name-calling, where ZA to embody someone using the board, the atrocities it would commit would be sickening. Others believe, when asked about ZO, his warning is clear and direct. To simply communicate via the Ouija board with ZO is to invite foul evil into your home. David then recalled a visit he made to a home at the owner's request to clear the house of negative energy. A friend of mine and her husband had moved into a new home. Within a few weeks, the household appliances began to break, one by one. First the oven, then the refrigerator. Next was the microwave, and finally the washer. Their disposition was constantly moody, and they found themselves continually fighting. I paid them a visit armed with my sage and candles. It didn't take me long to discover the source of their negative experiences. Sitting on the coffee table under clear glass was an old, homemade Ouija board. The numbers and the letters were placed where you could find them on a store-bought board, but there were additional words painted around the edges that included Z-O, Z-O. Shaking his head, he continued. I explained that the board is not decor, but rather a door. After I salted, burned, and disposed of the board, her husband told me that he has something to show me. I followed him to the guest bedroom, where he lifted the toilet seat to display an etched Z under the top cover. He warns us to close the board after each use. If you insist on using the board, ensure that you move the pointer to goodbye and say a prayer to close the board. Number 1. Lucifer. There is no other name that can instill a paralyzing fear at its mere mention than that of the devil. When the level of evil coming through the board itself calls itself Lucifer, you are dealing with an extremely powerful demon. Mr. David explains, it doesn't happen as often as you would think. Some spirits will spell out the devil or even Satan, but very few will dare to call themselves by the angel named Lucifer. J. David relayed the story of Eric, a young boy who engaged Lucifer through the Ouija board. I was called to a home where a young boy had been playing with the board. I cleansed and cleaned and said prayers throughout the home and felt confident that I had removed any negative entities that may have come through the board. I couldn't be sure, however, because I didn't feel a specific presence in the house. Only a peripheral heavy darkness that I couldn't pinpoint. During my follow-up visits, I observed a very drunk father and assumed the area of blackness belonged to him and his addiction. After interviewing the young boy, he didn't offer me very much information regarding his interaction with the board, other than that the name of the demon was Lucifer, and that it would repeat the words upside down. A week or so passed, and I received a frantic call from the young boy's mother. She asked me to visit them immediately, as there had been some frightening activity. I quickly arrived to find the boy locked inside his bedroom. The father was slurring threats through the door while the wife cried behind him. I asked if I could have a moment alone. The boy's parents removed themselves from the hallway and left me alone outside the bedroom door. As if he knew, the boy opened the door. He looked at me through tears and said, "Upside down," and then turned his gaze toward the window. I entered his room and walked towards the window. The room was cold and smelled of 2-day-old garbage. I looked out of his window this is the conclusion of the matter. The Ouija board has a message for you. Are you sure you want to hear it? I can tell you from personal experience that there is nothing the Ouija board has to say that I want to hear. I have not played with Ouija boards but once, and I quickly repented, and I refused to try it again. I live in a very haunted part of the United States, an area of Washington State known as Graham, Washington. I don't know what takes place here. I do know that the serial killer Ted Bundy had ties here. I've been told that there is a Church of Satan here, but I've never seen it, nor do I have a desire to find it. I've had some weird experiences at night while I'm asleep. I would wake up in the middle of the night, and all the dogs in the neighborhood would be barking. They would be barking in the exact same rhythmic pattern over and over and over again. If they weren't barking, they were howling, and they were howling in a very rhythmic pattern. And I've noticed it, and at first it didn't bother me, but then I began to notice it even more, and then it did begin to get on my nerves. I noticed, and one night, I haven't told many people about this, but one night I woke up, and it was a sudden awakening. I was laying in my bed, I was wide awake, and I heard a word being spoken. The word spoken could not be heard with natural ears, I don't think. I think it could only be heard by somebody with their spiritual mind attuned for certain things. It was so loud. It was so incredibly loud that I thought to myself, surely my roommates heard that. I should have been afraid, but I wasn't, because God was keeping me. But I should have been terribly, terribly afraid. The next morning, I went around asking my roommates who lived in the same building, in the same house with me. I asked them if they heard that, and naturally they heard nothing. And eventually I learned to stop talking about it, because if I spoke about it, people will eventually begin to think that I'm crazy or that I'm schizophrenic or something. So I stopped talking about it. But I'll never forget that night. A part of me wishes I knew what it was that was talking, and what it said. But then a greater part of me is like, leave it alone, don't worry about it, I don't want to know. But I do know this: I will not dabble with the occult. I will not play with Ouija boards. I will not mess around with that stuff, because it's is your business. I'm not trying to change that. But for those of us who do believe, if you read the Bible, consider Moses' visit to Pharaoh. God sent Moses to talk to Pharaoh about letting his people go. And God gave Moses several signs to prove that it was God who sent them. One of those signs was taking his staff and throwing it on the ground, and his staff would become a snake. Well, guess what? When Moses performed that feat in front of Pharaoh, Pharaoh called his magicians out, and his magicians took their staffs and threw them down on the ground, and their staffs became snakes as well. So what does that tell us? It tells us that Satan has power to whatever degree, and if we let him, he'll convince us. But we don't want to be persuaded by him of anything. We want to be persuaded by God. We want God to explain to us and to lead us and to guide us in the way that we should go. Because Satan is only going to lead us to ruin and to a quick and violent end. So, realize this. The devil does have power. But if you remember the story, Moses' snake devoured both their snakes. And Moses was able to pick his snake back up and turn it back into a staff. What does that tell? That tells, I don't know what that tells you, but it tells me that God is stronger and more powerful than anything the devil can do. So I'm putting my trust in God. So, in closing, just like to remind you, stay away from the occult. If you're going to be fascinated by it, fine. If you're going to read books, go for it. But don't try to connect with the other side. Don't try to connect with the other side. I'm telling you, it is a losing proposition. Okay, this is Smilin Observer, and I'm planning something big for Halloween. Halloween is in 6 weeks, so I'm planning to do a big video where you'll actually see my face this time.